The moment Henry's eyes met Lexi's, the world seemed to stop. His heart skipped, and something deep within him tugged, a feeling that was both electrifying and dangerous. He had never felt anything like it before. She stood in front of him, poised and radiant, her alien features strikingly beautiful yet undeniably intimidating. Her eyes, bright like the stars, held a fire within them that he couldn't quite understand, but it burned him just the same. Lexi, on the other hand, felt the heat of his gaze, and it stirred something she hadn't expected. Her people didn't fall in love. They didn't form connections. Their customs were cruel, cold and unyielding, built around a twisted tradition where they burned their mates alive to purify them. The thought sent a chill through her spine, but it wasn't enough to erase the growing pull she felt toward Henry, this human, so fragile, so different from the warriors of her kind. His presence made her question everything she had known. "You're not afraid of me?" Lexi's voice was low, almost challenging. She couldn't let him see how much the idea of him, this human, was unsettling her. Henry took a slow step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "Should I be?" His tone was casual, though the pulse in his throat gave him away. He wasn't afraid of her, not in the way she thought. He was afraid of how she made him feel, how his heart raced when she looked at him, how his thoughts tangled in confusion every time they spoke. She wasn't like anyone he'd ever known, but that made her all the more intoxicating. Her lips parted slightly as if considering him. There was a long pause before she answered, her voice softer now, almost hesitant. "You should be." Henry chuckled, a small sound that almost broke the tension. "I guess I'm just too curious to be afraid. There's something about you, Lexi." The name slipped from his lips effortlessly, and she felt her breath catch. How had he learned it so easily? Lexi fought the urge to step back, but her feet remained firmly planted. "Curiosity is dangerous," she warned, her words clipped. She had no intention of letting him get too close. It wasn't just that her kind could destroy him. It was that if she allowed this connection to grow, she might lose control of herself, her emotions. It was one thing to kill for duty. It was another to be consumed by desire. "I'm not afraid of danger." Henry took another step closer, his body language open, inviting her to test him. His eyes were dark with an intensity she couldn't ignore. "Are you?" Her pulse quickened, and for a fleeting moment, Lexi wondered what it would feel like to let go of the walls she had built around her heart. What would it feel like to have him close, to let him touch her without fear of what it might mean? The thoughts lingered, but she shoved them aside, locking them away. "You should be," she repeated, but this time her voice trembled slightly, betraying her. Henry leaned in a little, his lips barely an inch from her ear. "But I'm not. And I think deep down, neither are you." The words hung in the air, and Lexi's breath hitched. She stepped back, shaking her head as though to shake off the pull he had on her. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough to say I don't want to be afraid of you," Henry replied softly, his voice unwavering. Her heart raced faster than it should have, and her mind screamed at her to push him away, to remind herself of what was at stake. But there was a part of her, buried deep, that didn't want him to leave. Not now, not yet. Lexi turned away sharply, her voice rising with sudden defiance. "You have no idea what you're asking for, Henry." He reached out, just brushing his fingers against her arm. The contact sent a jolt through her, so strong it nearly broke her resolve. She could feel the heat of his touch, and for a moment, it was all she could focus on. A human's touch. Gentle. Warm. It made her forget the cold emptiness of the traditions that had shaped her life. He didn't pull away, didn't let her retreat any further. "Maybe I don't," he said quietly, "but I'm willing to learn." The silence between them thickened, charged with a new energy, a dangerous energy. Neither of them knew how to turn away from it, though both of them knew they should. But in that moment, their worlds collided, and Lexi's carefully built walls began to crack. Lexi couldn't escape the way his touch had lingered on her skin. It had been a brief moment, just a simple brush of his fingers, but it had burned through her like fire, igniting something she couldn't deny. She tried to push it away, but it clung to her, making her heart beat faster and her thoughts scatter. It wasn't just his touch, it was him. The human who wasn't afraid to look at her like she was something more than a weapon, more than a symbol of destruction. She paced the darkened hallway of the ship, her boots clicking sharply against the floor as she tried to rid herself of the unwanted heat that had taken root in her chest. She hated it. The feelings he stirred in her were dangerous. Her species didn't feel. They couldn't afford to. But every time she thought of Henry's gaze on her, every time she heard his voice, the walls she had so carefully constructed around her heart seemed to erode. It's just the heat of the moment, she told herself. He's a human. He doesn't understand. He can't. Yet there was something about the way he spoke to her that cut through the steel of her resolve. Henry had no fear of her. He didn't shy away from the fact that her species had a history of burning those they chose to love. In fact, he seemed to want to lean in closer to that danger, as if it were part of what drew him to her. Lexi stopped abruptly, her breath catching in her throat as she leaned against the cool wall. Her reflection in the window stared back at her, eyes wide with confusion and fear. Fear of herself. Fear of the emotions she could no longer contain. She was not supposed to want him, not supposed to long for him, but when had her heart ever listened to reason? Meanwhile, Henry sat alone in his quarters, his mind racing. He had come to this alien ship on a mission, nothing more. But ever since he'd met Lexi, nothing had seemed simple. Every word she spoke, every move she made, had him questioning everything. She was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. There was a depth to her, an intensity, that both terrified and fascinated him. What had been a simple fascination with her culture, her people, had quickly evolved into something deeper, something dangerous. But Henry wasn't the type to back down. Not now. Not when it felt like he was standing on the edge of something that could be monumental. A connection he didn't fully understand, but he felt it in every beat of his heart. He ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. There were so many things he didn't know about Lexi's people, so many traditions and rules that felt alien to him. But when he looked at her, he didn't see a monster. He saw someone who was fighting a battle she didn't deserve. Someone who was just as trapped by her heritage as he was by his own emotions. But she's not like them, he thought fiercely. She's not like her species. The thought that kept spinning in his mind was the one that made his chest tighten. She doesn't deserve to be alone in this. There was a knock at the door. Henry's head jerked up, and for a moment his pulse quickened. He hadn't expected anyone, especially not her. But the instant the door slid open, Lexi stood there, framed by the soft glow of the corridor lights, her face illuminated with uncertainty and something darker, something raw. "You came," he said, his voice low with a mix of surprise and relief. Her eyes flickered briefly to the floor before lifting to meet his gaze. "I had to." She stepped into the room, her presence immediately filling the space between them. Lexi could feel the weight of the moment, the heavy anticipation that hung in the air. She didn't know why she had come. Maybe it was the pull between them that was impossible to ignore. Or maybe it was the way Henry had looked at her, the way he saw her despite everything. "You're here because you think you owe me something," she said, her tone cold, but her voice wavered just enough to betray her. Henry didn't answer right away. Instead, he closed the distance between them, stopping just a breath away. He wasn't going to let her push him away. Not this time. I'm here because I want you, Lexi. And I don't care what your people do or what you think you owe me. I care about you. Her chest tightened at his words, her breath coming quicker as his presence overwhelmed her senses. She stepped back, shaking her head. You don't understand. My people don't love. We don't form bonds. We burn those who get too close. And you don't burn me, Henry interrupted, his voice soft but insistent. I'm not afraid of you. I want to be with you. And I think you want to be with me, too. Lexi froze, her eyes locking with his, searching for any sign of hesitation. But there was none. The sincerity in his gaze was unmistakable, and something inside her, a place she had buried deep, stirred in response. You don't know what you're saying, she whispered, but the words felt weak, like she was already losing the battle. Maybe I don't, Henry admitted, his voice steady, but I know what I feel. Her breath caught in her throat. She couldn't stop herself from stepping closer, her eyes not leaving his. And what do you feel? He reached out, brushing a strand of hair away from her face, his touch tender. I feel that us, it's worth fighting for. For a moment, time seemed to stretch between them. Lexi could feel the heat building in her chest, and it was no longer from anger. It was from something else. Something she didn't know how to name, but she wanted it, needed it. She couldn't push him away. Not anymore. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, the space charged with a current that neither could ignore. Lexi stood there, inches away from Henry, her heart pounding in her chest, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and longing. His touch had awakened something inside her, a flame she had fought to extinguish for years. She didn't know how to reconcile the way he made her feel with the rules of her people. The rules that told her to be strong, to remain detached, to never let another being get too close. But as Henry's fingers lingered on her cheek, gentle but firm, she felt a softness rise in her, something that terrified her. Her pulse quickened. She had never allowed anyone this close before. Never let herself be vulnerable like this. It was too dangerous. Yet the temptation to lean into him was overwhelming. Lexi, Henry murmured, his voice rough with need. He cupped her face with both hands, his thumbs brushing along her jawline, sending a shiver through her body. You don't have to hide from me. I'm not like the others. I won't hurt you. The words were both comforting and unsettling. How could he be so sure? How could he stand here, in the face of everything she had told him about her people, and still want to be with her? She could feel the weight of his gaze as it lingered on her, a mixture of warmth and desperation. I don't belong to you, she whispered, almost pleading with herself. I can't belong to anyone. Henry's lips quirked up into a half smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. But you do belong to someone, don't you? You belong to yourself, and I'm not here to take that away. I just want to be part of it. The honesty in his voice was undeniable. It made her ache in ways she didn't want to acknowledge. Her walls, the ones she had spent so long building, began to crack. She fought it, telling herself that letting him in would be a mistake, that it would change everything. But as his hand slid to her shoulders, pulling her gently closer, her resolve melted away. I can't stop thinking about you, Henry confessed, his voice low and filled with an intensity that stirred her deep within. Every moment we're apart, I want you more. And I don't care if it's dangerous. I don't care what the risks are. I just want you. Only you. Lexi closed her eyes, unable to hide the tremor that ran through her. This human, this fragile, emotional creature, was making her feel things she couldn't understand. But they were real, undeniable, and they made her ache with something raw and desperate. She didn't know what to do with it. Her mind screamed at her to walk away, to reject him, to keep him at arm's length. But her body betrayed her. Her chest heaved as she took a step forward, closing the gap between them. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized just how close they were now. So close that she could feel the warmth of his skin, smell the subtle, comforting scent of his cologne, and hear the steady thrum of his heartbeat. "Why me?" she asked, the question coming out before she could stop it. "Why would you want someone like me? Someone whose species burns the ones they love alive?" Henry's expression softened, and he reached for her hand, guiding it to his chest, where his heartbeat echoed beneath his shirt. "Because," he said quietly, "I don't see you as just your species. I see you, Lexi, the woman standing in front of me, the one who makes my heart race every time I see her, the one who doesn't push me away when I get too close." Her breath hitched at his words, and for the first time since meeting him, she felt something she had never allowed herself to feel: hope. A fleeting thought brushed her mind. What if she could have this? What if she could have him without the fear of being consumed by the very same flames her people use to destroy their mates? "I'm afraid of what you're asking," Lexi admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. She could feel the weight of his gaze, the way he seemed to see her, the way he made her feel as though she were more than just a tool of destruction. Henry's fingers gently traced the side of her face, as though memorizing the lines of her features. "You don't have to be afraid of me, but you do need to stop being afraid of yourself." His words sank in, deep. The truth of them wrapped around her like a blanket, soothing the fire inside her, even if only for a moment. It was true. She was scared of letting go, scared of letting him in. But she was more afraid of what would happen if she didn't. Her hands rose to his chest, tentative at first, as if testing the waters. When she didn't pull away, Henry exhaled in relief, his own hands finding her waist, pulling her closer. His lips hovered just above hers, close enough that she could feel the heat from his breath, the desperation building between them. "Just trust me, Lexi," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I'm not going anywhere." Her eyes fluttered shut, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Lexi allowed herself to believe him. Maybe it was time to stop fighting against the bond that had already begun to form. Time to stop pretending that what she felt wasn't real. The moment her lips met his, she felt the world shift. It wasn't fiery or reckless, but soft, gentle, like the beginning of something profound. Lexi's heart pounded, a mixture of fear and something stronger, something that she hadn't allowed herself to feel in so long. Love. But for once, she didn't pull away. She let herself feel it. She let herself be held, cherished, desired. And as their kiss deepened, the walls she had spent so long building around her heart finally crumbled. Lexi's breath hitched, her chest rising and falling with each heartbeat. As Henry's lips moved against hers, slow and deliberate. For a moment, the world outside of their embrace faded. There was only the warmth of his hands on her waist, the sensation of his body so close to hers, and the undeniable pull between them. She had never allowed herself to feel so exposed, so vulnerable, but here in his arms, everything seemed to make sense. The emotions she had fought so hard to suppress, longing, desire, tenderness, came rushing to the surface, and she couldn't bring herself to fight them any longer. The way Henry kissed her was gentle at first, as though he were afraid of breaking her. He was tentative, as if testing the waters, but when Lexi responded, when she tilted her head to deepen the kiss, he gave in. He pulled her closer, his hands sliding to the small of her back, pressing her body against his. The heat between them intensified, a slow burn that ignited every nerve in her body. Lexi's breath quickened, her lips parting slightly, inviting him further in. The tension that had been building since their first meeting now erupted, and there was no turning back. "What am I doing?" Lexi thought, a fleeting moment of clarity piercing through the haze of desire clouding her mind. He's human. He's fragile. He doesn't understand what my touch could do to him. But Henry didn't seem afraid. He didn't shy away when their bodies brushed, didn't flinch when the heat from her skin seemed to burn hotter. If anything, he leaned in closer, the strength of his hands gripping her tighter, pulling her into him as though he couldn't get close enough. "Lexi." He breathed against her lips, his voice raw with need. "You feel so right in my arms. I don't know how to explain it, but I need you. Please." His plea was simple, but desperate, and it shattered something deep inside her. She had never been needed like this, never been wanted with such intensity. The words that escaped his lips stirred something primal in her chest, something that wanted to reach out and claim him, something that burned as fiercely as the flames her people were known for. But she couldn't. She wouldn't. Could she? "Henry," she whispered against his lips, her hands sliding to his shoulders, gripping him tightly as if afraid to let go. "You don't know what you're asking. My people. Our touch. It's lethal. I can't control it. I can't." But Henry's hands gently cupped her face, forcing her to meet his gaze. His eyes, usually so warm and comforting, were now dark with something more urgent. "I don't care," he said, his voice firm yet tender. "I trust you. I trust us." His words made her chest tighten. Trust. It was a word that felt alien to her, yet it was exactly what she needed to hear. The trust he had in her was something Lexi had never expected, and it both terrified and exhilarated her. She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. "Henry," she murmured again, her voice shaking. "What if I hurt you?" But Henry only shook his head, a faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. "You won't," he said, his voice soft, almost a promise. "I know you won't. You're not like them, Lexi. You're not like what you think you are." Her pulse raced as she absorbed his words, the intensity of the moment threatening to overwhelm her. He had no idea how much she struggled against herself, against the instincts and the history of her people. The fire inside her was a constant companion, one that threatened to consume everyone she got too close to. Still, Henry didn't seem to be afraid. He was holding her as though he wanted to protect her from whatever she feared most. Lexi's breath caught as she realized just how much she wanted that. She wanted to be protected, wanted to believe that someone could love her. Despite the chaos inside her, could it really be that simple? Henry leaned in again, his lips brushing against her ear, sending a shiver down her spine. "I'm not afraid of you, Lexi," he murmured, his voice low and husky. "I'm afraid of losing you, of not being with you. You're everything I never thought I needed. But now that I've found you, I can't let you go." His words, soft and vulnerable, wrapped around her heart. And for the first time, Lexi felt something that she couldn't quite put into words. It wasn't just the heat between them, the growing desire. It was something deeper, something that made her want to fight for him, for them. It was the realization that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she had always believed. But still, the fear lingered. The fear that the flames she carried inside her would burn him, destroy him, as they had done to so many before. She had to protect him. She couldn't let him fall victim to her kind's violent legacy. "No," Lexi whispered, pulling back slightly, her hands pressing against his chest. "You don't understand. My touch—" "Lexi," Henry interrupted, his hands coming to rest on her hips, his gaze locking with hers. "I'm not afraid of your touch. I'm not afraid of what might happen. I want you, all of you, whatever that means." The sincerity in his voice sent a jolt of emotion through her, one that she couldn't fight anymore. She had spent so long convincing herself that she was better, off alone, that no one could ever love her, that no one would ever understand. but Henry did. And that understanding, that acceptance, made her ache in ways she hadn't thought possible. For a moment, the words she had rehearsed, the fears she had carried with her for so long, faded away. In their place was a quiet understanding, a promise, even if unspoken, that this was not the end. It was just the beginning. "Then prove it," Lexi whispered, her voice trembling as she pressed her lips to his once more. And this time, it wasn't just a kiss. It was a surrender. The world outside seemed to melt away as Henry's kiss deepened, his lips moving with a hunger she hadn't expected. Lexi's pulse raced in time with his every touch, her mind dizzy from the overwhelming warmth radiating from him. The moment was both a dream and a nightmare, a paradox of intimacy and fear that she didn't know how to navigate. But she wasn't afraid anymore. Not of Henry. Not of him. Not of the way his touch made her feel. It was the fire inside her that still scared her, the primal instinct that screamed for her to take, to burn, to claim, to dominate, to destroy. But Henry didn't pull away. He didn't flinch when the heat from her body wrapped around them like a furnace. Instead, he deepened the kiss, urging her closer, as though he were determined to prove that he could withstand the impossible. "I trust you, Lexi," he said against her lips, the words like a vow. "I trust us. We'll figure this out together. I promise." The way he said it, with such raw certainty, sent a wave of emotion crashing over her. She didn't know what to make of it. All her life she had been taught to distrust humans, to view them as fragile, weak, inferior. But Henry was different. His strength, his unwavering belief in her, was something she couldn't ignore. His touch was gentle yet sure, as though he could hold her together in the face of all her doubts. "Don't be foolish," she whispered, the words coming out shaky despite the calm she tried to project. "You don't know what you're asking for. My people, our people, are dangerous. My touch. It's fire, Henry. Real fire. I could burn you to ash without meaning to." Henry's gaze softened, his thumb brushing against her cheek in a tender caress. "I know what you are, Lexi, but I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid of losing this, losing you." His words settled into her chest like a heavy weight. He wasn't afraid of the fire she carried inside her. He wasn't afraid of what it could do to him. But Lexi was terrified of herself, of the uncontrollable force within her. The thing that had driven her people to destroy their mates, to burn them alive in an act of instinct so powerful that it could not be reasoned with. The thought made her pull back slightly, the distance between them widening, but Henry didn't let her escape completely. He placed a hand on the side of her face, gently urging her to look at him. His eyes were full of something she couldn't quite name, something that mirrored the longing, the ache, that had settled deep within her. "Lexi," he whispered, his voice soft but firm, "you're not like them. I see you. I know what you're afraid of, but I'm not afraid of you." "But you should be," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "My kind, we destroy. That's what we do. It's in our blood. We burn everything around us when we can't control ourselves." Henry's expression grew intense, his fingers gently tracing the curve of her jaw. "I don't care about your blood, Lexi. I care about you, about who you are, who you choose to be. You don't have to let your past control you, and you certainly don't have to let it control us." The conviction in his voice, the sincerity that poured out of him with every word made her heart beat faster, her chest tightening. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that they could work. But every instinct inside her screamed for caution, for distance, for safety. She couldn't risk hurting him, not when she knew what she was capable of. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to collect herself, But all she could feel was the heat of his body so close to hers, his presence wrapping around her like a shield. She opened her eyes again, and their gazes locked. Two souls who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. A human, fragile and warm, and an alien, dangerous and fierce. But together, something was building between them. Something undeniable. "You don't know how hard this is for me," Lexi whispered, the weight of her words making her voice tremble. "I want you, Henry. I want to be with you. But I can't let you burn. Not like that." Henry leaned in, his lips just inches from hers, his breath warm against her skin. "You're not going to burn me, Lexi," he said, his voice low and sure. "Because I'm not leaving. I'm right here, and I won't let you push me away." Her heart clenched at his words, a powerful wave of emotion crashing over her. She was torn, caught between the need to pull away for his safety and the overwhelming desire to stay in his arms, to let him in, to let herself feel what she had denied for so long. His arms around her felt like a lifeline she wasn't sure she could let go of. But there was one thing Lexi was certain of. She couldn't deny this. Not anymore. She didn't know where it would lead, didn't know what would happen when she let go of her fear. But she knew she didn't want to walk away from him. Not without trying. With a sharp inhale, she tilted her head up, meeting his gaze once more. This time, there was no hesitation. There was only the raw desire, the need to be close to him, to feel his touch and trust in his promise that he wouldn't leave her. "I'm scared, Henry," she confessed, her voice soft but steady. "I don't know how to make this work. But I don't want to lose you." His lips curved into a small but genuine smile, and he pressed his forehead to hers, their breaths mingling in the space between them. "You won't lose me, Lexi. I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here, and together we'll figure it out. I'll be with you through it all." The sincerity in his voice, the depth of his belief in them, melted the last of her doubts. The walls she had built around herself began to crumble, bit by bit, until there was nothing left but the undeniable truth. She was falling for him, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to stop. The world outside their small corner of the universe seemed irrelevant now. Time moved differently when you were caught in the orbit of someone who held your heart, who saw the real you, the one you were terrified to show the world. Lexi pressed herself closer to Henry, letting the warmth of his body seep into hers, her mind a whirl of emotions she could hardly name. The heat that had once terrified her, the heat she had learned to control, to lock away, was now a part of her that felt alive. The fire inside her no longer felt like a curse, not when she was with him. "I can't promise that this will be easy," Lexi whispered, her lips brushing against his neck, her breath warm against his skin. "I can't promise that I won't hurt you, or that my instincts won't overpower me at some point." Henry's arms tightened around her, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths, as though the weight of her fears had no hold on him. "And I can't promise that we won't face obstacles, Lexi. But what I do promise is that I'm here. I'm choosing you. We'll face whatever comes next together. You're not alone in this." She closed her eyes at the sincerity in his voice, a lump forming in her throat. Henry's unwavering faith in her, something that had never existed in her world, was something she didn't know how to respond to. It was both a balm and a weight. How could she live up to his belief in her? How could she let him believe that she was worthy of his trust? "I've never been able to trust anyone before," she admitted quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "Not fully. I've always had to keep a part of myself hidden, from my people, from myself. But with you, it's different. I feel like you see me, the real me, and I don't know what to do with that." Henry lifted her chin gently, bringing her face into his, their foreheads touching. "Then let me keep seeing you, Lexi. Let me show you that you don't have to hide anymore, that you don't have to be afraid of the fire inside you. I won't run from it, and I won't run from you." Her heart raced in her chest, and a slow, burning heat filled her from the inside out. Not the fear of destruction, but the heat of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in so long. Hope. Hope. It was a foreign concept to her, but in his arms, it felt like something real, something she could hold on to. The tension between them melted away, replaced by an intimacy that felt as natural as breathing. Lexi felt Henry's lips against her skin, soft, slow, full of unspoken promises. She allowed herself to lean into him, surrendering to the way his hands caressed her, holding her as though she was the most precious thing in the universe. "I don't want to be afraid anymore," she murmured against his chest. "I don't want to hide. Not from you. Not from anyone." Henry kissed the top of her head, his voice steady but filled with an emotion she could hear in every word. "You don't have to hide, Lexi. Not with me. Not ever again. You're safe here, and I won't let anything take that away from you. Not even yourself." The weight of his words, the sheer depth of his commitment, sent a shiver through her. She had spent so long running from the fire inside her, but with Henry, she was beginning to see that it didn't have to consume everything. She could choose to wield it, to control it. With him, not against him. The possibilities were infinite, but for the first time she didn't feel afraid of the unknown. She felt exhilarated by it. Her hands slid up to his face, her fingertips tracing the lines of his jaw, memorizing the feel of him. "And what about you, Henry? What happens when things get hard? When my instincts take over and I can't control myself?" He caught her hands, bringing them to his lips, kissing them gently. "I'll be here, no matter what. We'll face it together. We're stronger than you think, and you're stronger than you know." Lexi's heart fluttered, the words settling deep inside her like a promise. She had never felt like this before. She had always kept her distance from others, afraid of the damage she could cause. But now, in his arms, she saw a future she never thought possible. She saw a life where love, real love, wasn't a fantasy. It was a choice. And it was one she was ready to make. She pulled back slightly to look at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of doubt. But all she saw was love, pure and undiluted. It was terrifying. It was intoxicating. It was everything she had ever wanted and feared. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "But I want this. I want you." "I'm not going anywhere, Lexi," Henry replied, his voice a steady anchor in the storm of emotions that swirled around them. "We'll figure it out, one step at a time, together." For the first time, Lexi allowed herself to believe in the possibility of their future. She allowed herself to believe in them, and as she kissed him, with all the passion and heat that had always burned inside her, she knew that the fire between them would never consume her. It would only make them stronger. Together, they could face anything. The future was uncertain, but one thing was for sure. Lexi and Henry were no longer two strangers from different worlds. They were partners, bound by something far stronger than fate. And that was enough.